So hello and welcome to our weekly webinar. Today we will be doing a webinar, one from our online teaching tips series, and it's titled, It's All Greek to Me, Concept Checking. So this is an extremely important topic for all teachers, whether it be in a physical classroom or in an online classroom. Concept checking is key to knowing our students are understanding what's being taught and what they are learning. So let's have a look at what we will be talking about in this webinar. So firstly, there we go, sorry. So firstly, what is meant by concept checking and why is it important? We will be taking a look at ways in which to concept check in the classroom, when teachers should use it, and then some golden rules when concept checking. And as always, we have a Q&A at the end. So we are going to start with this great quote, and it is, if everyone is moving forward together, then success takes care of itself. And I think this is so fitting because concept checking is a two-way street. We need to know our students and we need to know which kind of techniques work for them, and vice versa. They need to be feeling confident in what they are learning. They need to be asking questions. They need to be participating. So if we all work together and do our bits, then success will happen for us.
Absolutely.
Yes. So let's start with the first question. So what is meant by concept checking? So we're just going to go through what it is and why it's important. So firstly, concept checking, what it is. So concept checking is finding out if the learner has understood a new item, such as new vocabulary, new grammar, comprehension of a text which has been read, and it checks that learners have understood instructions for an activity. So basically, it's just testing, do they know what's going on in our lesson? Whether it may be, are you teaching them vocabulary, grammar, are you reading, or have you given them some instructions? So let's have a look at why this is important. So concept checking is important because it helps our learners to apply the learned skills. So whatever you have learned in your lesson, this just kind of tests their knowledge. It ensures that our students know what to do in a given activity. So this refers to instructions we may have given them. Did they understand what we asked them to do? Do they know what is expected of them in this activity? And then, of course, it helps us as teachers to assess any gaps in the students' learning. And I think this is the most important part about concept checking, because if there are gaps, we can't really move forward and we can't take those steps forward. We need to know that, okay, my student does not understand this. I need to spend an extra 20 minutes on this, and that's okay. You will have those students. So concept checking is so important, and these are three kind of points that come across when we do concept check.
They are a vital part of our lessons, aren't they? They are the kind of
Definitely.
the pin, the thing that holds everything else together.
For sure.
Okay, so we'll put this in a bit early in our webinar today. So if you would like some more content, or if you're interested in doing our IQ TEFL course, then please head over to iqtefl.com, and there you can find a really amazing TEFL course that is fully accredited by Accreditat. It's available on all devices, your PC, your laptop, your tablet, your mobile, and you can interchange how you do it on those devices. If you want to do it one day on your laptop and one day on your phone, whatever suits you. And it's a fantastic course made by teachers for teachers. It's very interactive. It's not dry like a lot of TEFL courses like the one I did. It's actually really, really good. And also we have our CPD courses, which we mention every week. These are also available on iqtefl.com. So there are different ones that are being designed and uploaded, and they are also at a very good price, and they're great for your personal development. And if you want to view any more of our weekly webinars, whether that's previous webinars, there's over 20, about 20 odd webinars, I think now on our YouTube channel. And also we have one every week, like the live one we're doing today on a Wednesday. So click that subscribe button and head over to our other social media platforms as well for lots more free and fantastic resources. So let's carry on. We're going to look now at 5 simple ways to concept check. So to check for our students' understanding in all sorts of different areas. As we said, it's not just if they've understood the topic, but have they understood the instructions that we're asking them to do, and so forth. So the first one, repetition. So what do we mean? Literally, for example, how would we do this? Ask your students to repeat the instructions for you. To do this, you need to keep instructions short and simple. I know from personal experience, particularly with a real life classroom, it can be very easy to give your students lots of instructions. So you need to do this first, then this and this, and you may need to give them 5 steps of things to do. And most of us would struggle to remember maybe 3 that we can then do well. So if we keep them short and simple, and then we can literally just say to our students, what have you got to do? If it's in a real life classroom with a large group or in a group classroom, you could just choose 1 or 2 students. If it's a one-to-one or online, you can just ask your one student to repeat your instructions back to you. It seems very simple, but it's really effective. I have seen this when students have been given far too many instructions, and I've struggled to understand what the teacher was asking me to do after step 3. And I've seen it where teachers have kept it short, simple, and the students know exactly what is expected of them in that activity. We can use visual aids such as our props, flashcards, anything like that, writing on a whiteboard, using TPR, so that's our total physical response, our gestures, to ensure the understanding of keywords. So it could be numbering them. It could be saying read, listen, speak, anything as simple as that, that makes write, so that they know what we're asking them to do. And always be ready to prompt as necessary. It doesn't matter if our students forget. Sometimes it's good to, if they're halfway through an activity, to just double check that they know what to do next. Don't be afraid that they may have forgotten. And how else can we also do it? So we can, again, using TPR to reinforce understanding. So we can use it for our keywords. We can even bring back that teacher talk time and use TPR rather than any words. And I sometimes like to encourage my students to use TPR back to me. Can they tell me what to do using TPR? Again, that's a great way and a fun way of getting them to show if they've understood those instructions. When we are learning new vocabulary, it's vital that we ask our students to repeat new words. We can use fun voices with younger learners. You can use it with older learners as well if you know your student and you know they would enjoy that. Just adapt accordingly. But make sure you always ask them to repeat new words. That will help you to check that they can pronounce it properly, that they have understood it. Use rote learning to drill new grammar or vocabulary. We understand that rote learning can be very dry and it only has an appropriate place at certain points, particularly in ESL lessons, but it is very effective. If you're teaching a new tense, you can teach them all the pronouns and the verb that goes, the auxiliary verb that goes with all of those. Do it by rote. Again, you can use fun voices. You can get the children to stand up, sit down when they're saying it. You can make it fun. And you wouldn't want to overdo it, but it definitely has its place. And try to provide a variety of repeated activities for application. So not just asking them to do one kind of repetition, but maybe several, 2 or 3, to really underpin their understanding.
I would say the last 2 are really great for phonics when you're teaching phonics.
So. Definitely.
Yeah. So next we're going to take a look at comprehension questions. Now, I use this quite often in my lessons with older students as they are more capable of understanding comprehension questions. So let's go and have a look at why this is important. So students will often learn to read individual or small groups of words, but they may not understand what they've read. Now, this applies to both first language English students and second language English students. But I think we can all agree that when we have had a ESL lesson and our students are reading big chunks of text, most of the time they don't understand what they are reading. They might know key words in that text, but they definitely don't understand the gist of it. So let's take a look at how we can implement comprehension questions. So firstly, you would adapt the amount of text given to age and ability. So, it's not suitable if your student is at a lower level of English and has to read paragraph after paragraph. It won't work. So you need to kind of adapt that when you come across that in a lesson. Then you could also break down text into smaller sections. Now, I do this often. I usually highlight the sections I want my students to read, and then I will read some sections and we would just go back and forth that way. This is, I think, less stressful for them because it can be quite daunting when you have a big chunk of text you need to get through. But then you can also take that time once they have finished reading their, couple of sentences, you can concept check. What are they talking about? What is happening? What is this sentence about? And get them to kind of give you their answer in their own words. And then something I also love doing is using any pictures or images to aid in comprehension. So if you know your student well, you will know their strengths and weaknesses. Do they understand, certain vocabulary? Do they not know certain vocabulary? And this is where you can bring in pictures or props, flashcards, anything like that is great for helping that overall comprehension of what is being read. Some more points are that we need to ask relevant questions. So you can't ask something that is not, to do with what you are reading or what is being covered in the lesson, because this will just confuse them. So always make sure that your questions are relevant and do stem from the topic being taught or the text being read.
And to add to that, I think that shows also that we need to know the text ourselves, because I've made that mistake. I've read some of the text as a student's been reading and not always read the rest of it, and I've asked a question and it's not been relevant to the rest of that text, because we all make mistakes. And I learned the hard way that you don't do that. You need to make sure that you know the text and maybe have some questions already in mind.
Definitely. And also just make sure on that point that you brought up, Tammy, is that sometimes the lesson or the text maybe has been read in the previous lesson and the questions or the lessons continuing on. So just be aware of that and make sure you know what the text was so you can ask relevant questions in that lesson.
Really good point.
Then build on the question. So with younger students or less able students, you would start off very, very simple, just yes or no questions, maybe a couple of questions where you are sure they know how to answer. And then when appropriate, begin to ask the work question. So what, when, why, to check for understanding, still keeping it to the point, very simple, so it's not overwhelming. They don't feel like they can't answer it because they don't understand. But this is where you could possibly bring in, you know, some fun. For example, if you had a younger student, what I like to do is always kind of extend on, if we looking at a picture, maybe asking them, what color is Anna's shirt? You know, they know the vocabulary. 9 times out of 10, they're familiar with color. So this would be an easy question for them to kind of answer. This also helps with just confidence levels in our students. And then ask students to tell you what happens next in the story. So that's also great. That kind of gives you a good indication of, are they understanding what the story is about?
Yeah, definitely. I love to ask particularly those what questions. So you can say, how is Nick feeling? And they can say, he is sad. And then if they have that level of vocabulary, that level of understanding, I will often say, how do you know? And maybe they can underline in the text, or they can say, oh, he said he is sad, or he looks sad. And that shows you they're not just repeating what's been said, but they have that real understanding. They know why someone's feeling or why something has happened in the story.
Definitely.
So point 3, we mentioned about this right at the beginning, but use props and TPR. As online teachers, we cannot emphasize the importance of this. This really is all using props and TPR are always, when they're relevant and appropriate, are highly effective, and you can use them with younger learners, and you can use them with adult learners as long as they are age appropriate. So why do we need to use these? Well, again, it will add a fun element to the lesson. Checking for understanding can be a bit boring. It's not exciting, potentially. But if we introduce these fun elements, so you could use your props or something that are related to what they've just read, or you're teaching vocabulary, so you might have some fun flashcards, things like that. It gives that fun element. It's really effective in helping learners to remember new concepts. So we all learn in different ways. Some of us are better with listening, speaking, or doing. But all of us learn from all of those different ways. So we need visual, we need auditory, and we need hands-on or our kinesthetic learning. And props and TPR are a great way to ensure that that's happening in our lessons. Remember that we always use age-appropriate props, as I've just said, such as flashcards with older learners that will aid in their comprehension. I often think, if I was my students' age, what props would I enjoy? What props would work for me, and which ones wouldn't? You have to try and put yourself in your students' shoes at times. And again, this is why preparation is so important. So you need to know before your lesson, what props might you need, what props will you definitely need, and what TPR do you know that your student will respond to? So how can we do this? So when teaching new vocabulary, you could ask your student to find their own props and show them to you. I love doing this, particularly with our younger learners. So if you're teaching something like toys or colours, you can show your toys, you can show your flashcards of colours, and then you can say, can you find me your teddy bear? Where's your car? Or even, can you draw me one if they don't have one? They love it. They are up and out of their seats. That gives them the energy. They really, and actually a lesson like that, I get to the end and I've had fun. Because
definitely.
My students are happy, and it's the best feeling. You can use flashcards. So a way you can do this, for example, you could have a flashcard of, maybe if you were teaching ball, for instance, you could show them the picture ball. What is this? And then you could introduce the words to them. So they're seeing the visual picture, but actually what it is, and then they're seeing the word. So they're seeing both things to relate to it. And you can even ask your students to make their own simple flashcards. So this is something I've seen more in real life classrooms, because you have more time potentially in a class to do this. And I've seen it when children were learning French or were learning phonics. They would write their own phonemes down, or their own vocabulary that we're learning in that language, and they liked that. And again, because they're actively doing it, it's helping them to retain that information, and they're really understanding. They're drawing a picture of a ball and writing ball, they will know that that's a ball.
So next we're going to take a look at extend. Now this is quite a broad topic, but it's also one that is extremely important during our lessons. So let's take a look at why this is important. So it gives you as a teacher a chance to see if your student has understood the topic. So by extending, it kind of gives us that bit of feedback, you know, do they kind of comprehend what is happening? Do they know what the topic is about? Or, you know, do they know how to use the certain tense or grammatical structure that you've taught them, whatever it may be? It allows the student time to be able to practice using that new concept and self-assess their own conception. So this is great because by extending, it's involving them, it's getting them to kind of share their opinion or share their answer, but at the same time, it's giving you that kind of a little bit of knowledge. Okay, what I'm doing is working. They are on the same page as I am, you know, or it might be the other way. Okay, I need to start all over again. My student is not comprehending what's going on, and that's okay. You will have those lessons. I've had many of those lessons,
Me
but
too.
by extending, it kind of helps you to see that, and you're not just, you know, plowing ahead and your student is kind of just lost. So we never want our students to feel like that. So by extending, it kind of just tests all those areas out.
And we should never feel a failure if our students haven't understood. It doesn't necessarily, it could mean that we've not taught it very well, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. And that's why that extension exercises are great. And just welcome the challenge and think, how can we adapt?
Definitely. Yeah, we should never be ashamed or feel like we did a bad job. You know, you're always going to have those difficult lessons. I've had students that didn't even talk to me in my lessons. So you're going to have those lessons, but just do your best, you know, kind of do what you can. So then how can we extend in lessons? So when teaching new vocabulary, you can ask students if they know any other words related to the subject. So there's a great game you can play. I can't remember what it's called, but you give the student a topic and they need to think of the first word that kind of comes to mind, you know, about that topic. So whether it be fruit, so they could name banana, and then you could say another word and they say another word. So it kind of just tests out, do they know what fruit is, basically, just to give a quick example. And then, of course, you can ask students to make up their sentences using the new grammar being taught. Now, you can do this with vocabulary as well. Are they using that vocabulary correctly? Do they understand what it is? You know, if they're using cake as a verb, then you know you've got a bit of an issue. So it's a great hands-on way to kind of test that vocabulary. And then, of course, ask students to draw new words, find their own objects related to the topic. So this is great. This is what Tammy mentioned. You know, maybe you're doing a lesson on food. You can ask them to go and grab something from their kitchen and show you. So it's just fun ways to kind of extend on their learning and at the same time test, do they understand what is happening in the lesson?
It's a good one to leave as a homework task as well, isn't it? Can you find me 4 things and bring them to your next lesson? They really enjoy doing that.
Yeah. And then we have some more points on how you can extend in your lesson. So write out students' incorrect answers and then ask them to self-correct when possible. This is great for all the students. It also promotes that self-correction generally moving forward. So a lot of my students that I've done this method with generally now tend to self-correct without having to ask them to correct their mistake. So this is just a great hands-on way again. And then a little bit of fun, you could mispronounce new words to test if your student can identify the mistake and are able to correct it. So this, I would say, when you are fully confident your student knows the new words and they've used them, they've practiced using them, you can add this step in and just have a little bit of fun with your student. And then deliberately give the wrong name for new vocabulary to test their understanding. Again, this is super fun. I've done this. I've used flashcards and said, is this a banana, when it's actually a cat? So it's just fun, and they think it's fun. They think it's funny, so they try and correct you. So it's just a good time, and it's a very stress-free way to kind of test that knowledge.
It is. I love doing that with my students.
Yeah.
So our fifth point, our fifth and final point is to ask the students to teach you. So why would we do this? Well, it creates an interactive, and again, as we're always promoting, a fun element to the lesson. As Rose said right at the beginning, concept checking is a two-way street. We never want to be the teacher that just talks for the whole lesson and never asks the student any questions, that they never interact with their students. So by asking them to teach you, they are obviously physically very involved. It's an excellent way in which students can revise the concept and engage them. Many students really enjoy this challenge. They relish it. And if you kind of almost pretend that you don't really understand what you've taught them, and you can trust your student in that way, particularly in a real life classroom setting, this works very well. They love it. They love being able to say, that's not right. You told me this. It is fun. It gives the student a sense of independence. As we said in a webinar, quite a few webinars ago, the most effective teacher is the one who can finally let go of that of any kind of restraint, and the student just flies on their own. That's our ultimate goal for all of our students. And then as a teacher, by viewing what they're teaching us or their peers, then any gaps in the understanding will become apparent to us as the teacher, and we can then fill those gaps. So how would we do this? Well, simply, first of all, literally ask your students to teach you the new concept. So if this was in a real life classroom setting, or if you were teaching an online group setting, you can split the class into smaller groups and ask the students to take it in turn to teach their peers. I've worked, as I said before, within schools. This is a really effective way. As a teacher, you can then go around and monitor each group, and you can really see who's really grasped it and who hasn't been listening or who hasn't understood it properly. Because there's always that one student whose head's in the clouds. I was a daydreamer as a child, so I do understand that. You can create mind maps. I love being able to do this. So you can create mind maps with students to elicit the learnt vocabulary and so forth. So, for example, as Rose was saying earlier, if you've been learning fruit, you could get one of your students to come to the front of the class, or if you're in a group setting or an online setting, you can literally get them to use the interactive whiteboard. I will often give them maybe a minute to write as many as they can, or to say as many different, so if it was fruit, many different fruits as they could. And if you realize there's other things slipping in there, so if you were checking grammar, and they were giving you were looking at one tense and they were giving you a different tense, you could see that there was a bit of confusion there or some gaps. And again, it would give you that opportunity to fill those. So how do you concept check in your lesson? So if you have any ideas or what you have any practices that you normally do, please leave them in the comments below. We love reading your comments and we will get back to you. So what about you, Rose? How do you concept check in your lessons?
For me, I love to make use of any sort of prop or picture or anything like that with my younger students. I think it's important for us to make sure you know your students' needs and their abilities before you go into the lesson. This will help you to concept check, which is appropriate to your students. So I think that's the key, but I love asking extension questions. That's like my go-to, because you can adapt that, with age or level of English. So whether you're doing you're teaching a young student, you can kind of have very simple, basic questions, but it's still testing that knowledge that you're teaching them. And then for your older students, your more capable students, you can kind of make it a little bit more challenging, asking them about tenses or grammar or anything like that. So my go-to is extension questions, but if my student loves visuals, then I'll make use of props and TPR and that kind of thing. So that's basically what I like to do in my lessons.
Yeah, I love extending, and one of my favorite go-tos is for the grammar when I've taught them a new grammar structure. Okay, so yesterday I was teaching comparatives and superlatives to a very bright young girl, and she's so clever. And being able to say, okay, can you give me a sentence with a comparative? And I think she's 7, and she understands what that means. And she just gave me a stream of them, and then superlatives before I even asked her. So that was great. I could see straight away she'd got it. And other times I've asked them, and they sit there. And you think, okay, we need to go back over this again. Let's break it down. And that's great to be able to be ready to adapt. And again, it's not a failure. It's only a failure if you fail to adapt and rise to that challenge.
Yep, I agree. So let's have a look at when should teachers concept check. Now, this is so important. So we need to be sure that we know when and how to use concept checking. We can't concept check, 24/7 throughout the lesson. We need to be strategic with it. We need to implement it when the time is right and when you feel it is necessary to implement it. You don't want to take away from the lesson, but you want to make sure that it kind of fits in when it should. So let's have a look at when we should concept check. So we need to concept check when new vocabulary, grammar, or a concept is taught. So this is extremely important, especially if you are teaching second language English. We need to make sure that our students are aware of that vocabulary, how to use it, what it is, how to use that grammar, because we need to keep in mind that our students aren't being exposed to the language 24/7 like, first language English students are. So they might not ever have heard of it. So we need to just make sure that they know what's going on, that they know how to use it. Then, of course, we need to use concept checking when revising recently learned concepts. So like I said, maybe the concept was taught in the previous lesson and the next lesson is just the questions following on from that. So we need to kind of just revise that and make sure they still remember, they still understand. Then we need to use concept checking when completing reading activities. Very important, especially for ESL students, because we need to make sure they understand what the text is about. They may know the vocabulary used in the text, but they may not understand what it is about. So when doing reading activities, concept checking is key. Then, of course, for given instructions. So this is just to make sure our students know what is expected of them, what they need to be doing. And then when setting homework and specific targets. And this is great. This is more for a self-reflection, I think. Do they know what is expected of them in their homework task or what targets they have to achieve for the next lesson? So it's just a great idea to concept check and make sure they have understood what you've kind of set for them. And then we will take a look at some golden rules. So what do you think we should remember when concept checking? So please share your ideas or your opinions and your answers in the comments down below. We'd love to read your golden rules for concept checking. So do you have any to add before I kind of share mine?
I think mine are probably coming up.
Okay, so let's just go on. Okay, so things to remember when you are concept checking. So provide a variety of activities to support learning. Again, remember all students are different and they learn in different ways. So we need to adapt to their needs, their learning needs. Involve your students. So encourage self-correction and assessment. Now, we actually have a great resource for this. So it's called a reflection journal. And this kind of lets your students make a little bit of a summary. It lets them write down what they think their strengths are, their targets that they set for themselves, what they need to work on. So this is great. I would say more so for older students, but you could adapt this for younger students, just simplify it. Maybe ask them to write 1 or 2 things that they are good at or something that they think they need to improve on. So by involving your students through asking them to reflect on their own learning, and their own understanding is a great way to just concept check, basically. And then be ready to simplify instructions if your student doesn't understand them. I've had to do this many times before where I've completely overcomplicated something and I thought to myself, oh no, like I don't even understand that. So let me just start again. Yeah, and that's okay. You can start again, but always just kind of have it in the back of your mind. I need to make sure my student understands this. So if I need to simplify the instruction, if I need to give them a different instruction so that they understand, that's totally okay. And it is recommended to do that. And then, of course, allow your student enough time to answer questions. When I started working online, I did not do this.
Something I had to learn.
I came in with a mentality of, kind of still thinking of my first language students who kind of answer really quickly because they have that vocabulary to answer. But our ESL students may not have that vocabulary. They may know the answer, but they don't know how to say it. So give them 5 to 10 seconds to just kind of think about it. And if they really don't know, you can go ahead and help them, but maybe prompt them, don't just give them the answer, kind of help them along. Use your flashcards, use, keywords, get them talking. But always remember to give them that time to kind of just think and get their thoughts together before moving on, or just giving them the answer.
I have to literally count 1, 2, 3.
I know.
4, 5, and it can feel like a lifetime when they're not saying anything. But it's something I've, like yourself, Rose, I have really learnt, and it is much better. So many times I'm just about to prompt and they've got it.
Yep.
Okay, so as always, we'd love to hear your ideas, your thoughts, your opinions. Maybe there's things we said that you're not sure of, that you don't understand, or maybe you don't even agree with them. We welcome all your comments. So what do you think the benefits are of, there's a mistake there, I do apologize, of concept checking? So please leave your thoughts in the comments below and we will get back to you. So as always, at the end of our webinar, we have, I'm going to start again. If you would like, I'm so sorry. If you would like to download more of our free resources and content to help you become an online teacher, maybe to help you, maybe it's something you've never done before and you're becoming an online teacher, maybe you've been doing it for years and you just want some new tips to freshen you up. We have some of these quick cards on iqtefl.com. If you go on for our webinar today, you can find them. And there's one about concept checking, those 5 ways that we've looked at that we can concept checked in our lessons. But there's about 20 odd quick cards that are on our site now. They're being added to all the time. Again, if you are interested in doing your own TEFL course and becoming an online teacher, or you'd like to do a refresher course, then our course is available at iqtefl.com. We have our CPD courses, as we mentioned earlier, to help you with your own personal development. For example, safeguarding, the psychology of individual learners, and much more. And finally, if you would like any more of our weekly webinars, then again, click that subscribe button. Head over to our different social media platforms. We are live every Wednesday on YouTube, as we are today. And as we said, there are lots of ones to come, and there are lots of ones in the past that you can catch up on. So hit that subscribe button and also hit that like button. And if you go to iqtefl.com, you can also see there are many free resources, vlogs, blogs, videos. There's so much going on over there, and it's really helpful, whether you're a new teacher or, as we said, you've been teaching for many years. There's so much there to kind of refresh and enhance different tips. So we'd love it if you went over there and subscribed. I'm sure you'd enjoy it if you did. So thank you so much for coming to our webinar today. We hope that you found it useful, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.